Do you think this is just a Hollywood villain, a fictional character made up to make a movie more thrilling? What if I told you he was real? A flesh and blood man who rose to the most powerful throne in the ancient world and turned it into a reign of blood and terror. He murdered his own brother, right before their mother's eyes. His brother's blood stained her robe, and the pain of that moment would haunt her for the rest of her life. According to ancient sources, after hearing mocking words from the people of Alexandria, he ordered a brutal massacre. Some accounts claim the violence raged for days, leaving parts of the city shrouded in smoke and fire. His name was Caracalla, a man obsessed with Alexander the Great, yet whose legacy was one of betrayal, slaughter, and fear. And the true story is darker than anything you've ever seen on screen. The tale of Caracalla begins in a time of chaos for the Roman Empire, the 3rd century in age when the throne was not inherited but seized through blood and the sword. Caracalla's father, Septimius Severus, was not born in Rome. He came from Leptis Magna, a bustling city on the coast of Libya. From warrior to emperor, he used intellect, strength, and ruthless determination to defeat all rivals and claim the throne of the most powerful empire in the ancient world. Caracalla's mother, Julia Domna, was also not Roman. She was the daughter of a noble Syrian family, celebrated for her learning, refinement, and passion for the arts. She was not only an empress, but a shrewd strategist and a scholar in the treacherous heart of the imperial court. Caracalla was born into a legacy of power that fused the bloodlines of North Africa and the Middle East, a prince of mixed heritage, not purely Roman, yet marked from birth as one destined to rule the empire. It was a heritage that gave him both strength and a unique identity, but it also planted the seeds of bitter rivalries that would one day explode into violence. In 188 AD, in Lugdunum, a thriving cosmopolitan city in Gaul, a royal child came into the world. He was given the name Lucius Septimius Bassianus, a long, heavy name, but not yet one that could unlock the gates of ultimate authority. From the moment he could walk, the boy lived in the shadow of imperial ambition. At just 9 years old, his father elevated him to the title of Augustus co-emperor of Rome itself. To seal his claim to legitimacy, his name was reshaped into Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, tying him directly to one of Rome's most revered dynasties. Yet history would not remember him by this grand ceremonial name. Instead, he would forever be known as Caracalla, a nickname born from the hooded cloak of Gaulish soldiers, a garment he wore so constantly that it became inseparable from his image. From a young age, Caracalla's mind was gripped by an obsession with Alexander the Great. This was no casual admiration, at least according to ancient writers. It was a fixation that consumed him. Some sources claim he copied Alexander's style of armor, wore wigs to mimic his hair, and even altered his appearance, all to present himself as a living echo of the Macedonian king. In his earliest years, Caracalla was remembered as a polite, agreeable boy, courteous to his parents, gracious to their friends. But as the years passed, that softness dissolved. In its place grew a man of steel, cold, unyielding, and quick to embrace violence. The Alexander in his mind was no longer just a role model. He became a commandment, a divine order that Caracalla believed must be fulfilled no matter the cost. To strengthen his hold on power, Caracalla entered into a political marriage, the kind designed to bind powerful families together. His bride was Plautilla, daughter of Plautianus, the most influential Praetorian prefect in the empire, commander of the elite Praetorian Guard, and one of the Severan dynasty's closest allies. On the day of their union, the imperial halls were filled with gold, music, and the scent of incense. But behind the lavish celebrations lay a marriage that was doomed from the start. Ancient accounts, particularly hostile ones, describe Caracalla and Plautilla as despising one another. The marriage, far from creating unity, was marked by tension and disputes. According to some sources, Plautilla complained to her father about Caracalla, worsening the hostility between their families. Caracalla did not forget, nor did he forgive. He is said to have sworn an oath in private, "When I ascend the throne, my enemies will have no place left to stand." The first strike came with a letter of formal accusation that Plautianus was plotting to betray the emperor, a charge that, according to ancient sources, may have been nothing more than Caracalla's own fabrication, carefully crafted to seal his fate. The end came swiftly. Plautianus was seized and executed, with some sources claiming his body was displayed publicly as a warning, though details vary between accounts. Yet Caracalla was not finished. He exiled Plautilla and her family to an island off the coast of Sicily. Later accounts, many from hostile sources, allege they were executed on Caracalla's orders, though the exact circumstances remain uncertain. From that moment forward, the message to the empire was written in blood. To oppose Caracalla was to sign your own death warrant. Caracalla and Geta brothers by blood, but in nothing else. If Caracalla bet on the blue chariot team, Geta would immediately back the green. If Caracalla said go, Geta would say stop. They were polar opposites. And from petty wagers to matters of state, everything between them became a battlefield. Their father, Emperor Septimius Severus, is believed to have taken them both to Britannia, a cold, windswept land where the Caledonian tribes resisted Rome, possibly to harden them as warriors and perhaps to unite them against a common foe. But the Caledonians did not fight as Rome expected. They hid in the shadows, striking with guerrilla tactics, dragging the campaign into a frustrating stalemate. And in the bitter northern winds, Septimius Severus's health began to fail. Before breathing his last in Eboracum, modern-day York, he left his sons with a final piece of advice: be harmonious with one another, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all others. Caracalla and Geta followed only the last two. Upon their return to Rome, hostility erupted. They split the imperial palace in two, each with separate entrances and their own personal guard. The shared banquets were gone, replaced by suspicious glances, fear of poisoning, and the constant dread of assassination. Julia Domna, desperate to end the blood feud, arranged a meeting for reconciliation. No weapons, no guards, just the two brothers and their mother. But Caracalla turned that meeting into a trap. At his signal, his soldiers burst in and stabbed Geta to death in front of their mother. She screamed, cradling her dying son, his blood soaking into her robe. But Caracalla did not look back. Power had triumphed, and family was dead. Geta's death did not cool the feud. It was merely the prologue to a tempest of blood that would sweep through the empire. With eyes colder than forged iron and a will sharpened like a blade, Caracalla set out to destroy his brother's allies and, according to ancient accounts, even erase his very name from history. He issued the order, and his soldiers fanned out like a dark tide across Rome and the farthest provinces. The list of the condemned seemed endless. High officials who had served under Geta, trusted advisors who had once leaned close to whisper counsel, elderly tutors who had taught him his letters, household servants who had poured his wine, even the charioteers who had driven in his name. No one was spared. No hearings, no defense, no mercy. The outcome was always the same death. Ancient chroniclers such as Cassius Dio claimed that nearly 20,000 lives were taken in this purge, a number that may have been exaggerated but still speaks to the scale of the bloodshed. 20,000 voices strangled before their last words could be spoken. 20,000 pairs of eyes, wide in terror, fixed forever on nothing. From the tightest, twisting alleys to the marble-lined plazas of Rome, soldiers came in the dead of night. Boots thundered on cobblestone, iron-shod rams splintered wooden doors, and torchlight flooded private rooms. Men and women were dragged, shivering, into the streets. The clang of steel against steel clashed with screams that pierced the darkness. Blood ran into the gutters, seeped between the ancient paving stones, and crept down the marble steps where Romans had once gathered each morning to trade gossip and bread. By dawn, the city lay under a suffocating fog, not of weather, but of fear. It clung to every breath, followed every footstep, and lodged itself deep in the beating heart of the empire. Yet killing alone did not satisfy Caracalla's hunger. His ambition reached beyond the grave. He would annihilate the very memory of his brother. The decree of damnatio memoriae, the erasure of memory, was proclaimed like an unseen death sentence. Every statue carved in Gaeta's likeness was smashed to rubble. Every inscription bearing his name was chiseled into blankness. Every painted portrait defaced until the face was unrecognizable. From the roaring marketplaces at Rome's center to the remote, windswept temples on the frontier, the name Gaeta vanished as if it had never been uttered. To speak it aloud in public was not merely forbidden, it was an act of suicide. One artifact told the story more vividly than any imperial edict. A family portrait of the Severan dynasty was discovered, its fine paintwork still rich with color, except where Gaeta's face had been. That space had been gouged away in rough, ugly strokes. Some ancient accounts even claimed it was smeared with filth, an ultimate insult meant to erase and defile his brother's memory. From that moment, in the eyes of the empire, there was only one name, one face, one power seated upon the imperial throne, Caracalla. But the blood of Gaeta and his followers was barely dry when Caracalla turned toward the other pillar of Roman power, the army. He understood the old truth, he who commands allegiance commands Rome. So he bought their loyalty. He is said to have doubled their pay, showered them with gifts, and turned devotion into a commodity to be bought, an image preserved in hostile accounts. The camps erupted in cheers, the soldiers sang his name, but every denarius he poured into their hands drained the imperial treasury further, bleeding it white. Rome, for all its grandeur, was now teetering on the edge of a financial abyss. To refill the coffers and to widen his grasp, Caracalla played his next card, the Constitutio Antoniniana. For the first time in the history of the empire, nearly every free man within Rome's vast borders was granted Roman citizenship. It sounded like an act of imperial generosity, a sweeping gift of equality, but it was a masterstroke of calculation. New citizens meant new taxpayers, their silver flowing straight into the state's coffers. And with citizenship came another privilege, the right to serve in the legions. That meant more recruits, more swords, and more bodies to throw into the wars Caracalla was already dreaming of. Beneath the noble words of the decree lay its true purpose, not unity, not justice, but the preparation for conquest. And Caracalla's gaze was already fixed far beyond Rome's marble walls. His first opportunity came when the Alemanni tribe on the northern frontier appealed to Rome for help against their enemies, the Chatti. Caracalla agreed, but instead of aiding Haiyan, he betrayed them. Some sources claim he ordered the killing of Alemanni men of fighting age, seizing their lands, before turning his forces on the Chatti. Whether entirely true or colored by hostile accounts, the story reflects the ruthless image Caracalla carried in the borderlands. After his bloody campaigns in the north, Caracalla set his sights south, to Alexandria, the jewel of Egypt, the greatest center of learning and commerce in the Mediterranean. It was a city forever tied to the name of Alexander the Great, the man Caracalla idolized above all others. He expected to be welcomed as a triumphant emperor, a second Alexander come again. But instead of the thunder of cheers he expected, Alexandria met him with laughter sharp, cutting, and merciless. The Alexandrians had a reputation across the empire for their quick wit and love of biting satire, and they wielded it like a weapon. They mocked Caracalla for the murder of his brother Gaeta, a crime that still stained his name in whispers throughout Rome. They ridiculed the way he cast himself as a living god, draped in the trappings of divinity. Every jest, every sly grin struck at his pride like the thrust of a dagger. Something in Caracalla snapped. The thin mask of imperial composure, as the chroniclers tell it, tore away, revealing the raw, dangerous rage beneath. What followed would stain Alexandria's streets in fire and blood. With a single order, the streets of Alexandria, once alive with commerce and scholarship, became a battlefield. Roman soldiers surged forward like a tide of steel and fire. Every man of fighting age was cut down where he stood, whether he held a sword or not. Doors were battered in, families dragged into the open. Shouts of defiance turned into screams of despair as homes were put to the torch, their wooden beams collapsing in showers of sparks. Treasuries were ransacked, silks and gold torn from shelves and hidden vaults. Ancient accounts describe Alexandria, the glittering jewel founded by Alexander the Great himself, engulfed in violence and bloodshed. Some later writers claim the chaos lasted for days, though the exact duration remains uncertain. The air was choked with smoke, the once proud skyline now a jagged silhouette of ruin. And so, in a twist drenched in irony, the city most sacred to Caracalla's idol was razed by Caracalla's own hand. In his heart, at least according to ancient accounts, the image of Alexander the Great had never faded. These sources suggest he saw himself as Alexander's heir, destined to carry forward a legacy of conquest. To fulfill that destiny, one great obstacle remained: Rome's most formidable eastern rival, the Parthian Empire. But Caracalla did not come roaring like a lion. He approached like a serpent, hidden and coiled. According to the historian Herodian, instead of declaring war, he sent the Parthian king a proposal of marriage and offered to wed the Parthian princess, uniting the two empires in blood rather than in battle. According to Herodian, the wedding erupted into a massacre, a dramatic account that some modern historians treat with caution, questioning whether the event unfolded exactly as described. The Parthian king escaped, but the betrayal ignited a hatred that would burn between Rome and Parthia for generations. Still unsated, Caracalla drove his legions deep into Mesopotamia. Sources report that Roman forces ravaged Mesopotamian villages, burning and plundering as they advanced. Later descriptions speak of emptied granaries and desolate roads lined with the dead images that may mix fact with the rhetoric of Rome's critics. By the time the legions passed on, they left behind nothing but smoldering earth and the stench of death. And then, in a moment that seemed harmless enough, Caracalla stepped away from his entourage, finding a spot by the roadside to relieve himself. No armor, no guards at his side. Ancient sources disagree on the assassin's motive. Some claim Caracalla had denied him a promotion. Others point to a deep personal grievance. Regardless of the cause, the soldier struck when the emperor was most vulnerable, the moment to settle the blood debt. The thrust of the blade ended Caracalla's life quick, sudden, and merciless, just as he had ended Gaeta's. And the man believed to have orchestrated the assassination was none other than Macrinus, Caracalla's most trusted right hand. In a cruel twist of fate, at least, as the ancient sources tell it, Caracalla fell to the same power struggles and betrayals he had long fostered. Caracalla, a name once bound to the fiery ambition of youth, a prince born into power carrying the blood of faraway lands, who dreamed of standing shoulder to shoulder with Alexander the Great. But instead of leaving behind pages of glorious victories, he etched himself into human memory through chapters soaked in blood. From a man who aspired to be a great conqueror, Caracalla came to be remembered, at least in hostile sources, as the embodiment of tyranny. A betrayer of his own family, a hand stained with the blood of innocence, and a soul consumed by power. He conquered many lands, but lost the greatest thing of all his humanity. The history of ancient Rome has seen many brutal emperors: Nero, Caligula, Commodus. Yet Caracalla stands apart for one reason. His cruelty was not reserved solely for his enemies, but directed toward those closest to him, the very people he should have protected. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson history leaves us. Absolute power does not create greatness. It only reveals the monster hidden in the human heart. And you, do you believe Caracalla is the perfect example of that in all of Roman history? Or does history still keep darker stories, hidden tales we have yet to hear?